The midday sun beat down on the dusty border town of San Miguel, a place caught between lawlessness and tension. Wind carried whispers and grit through deserted streets. Wooden shutters creaked. Locals peered from behind cracked windows. No one spoke. They just watched. Dear listeners, before we move forward, please subscribe my channel to hit 1,000 figure. Then came the sound of hooves. A lone rider approached, calm and steady, his silhouette sharp against the horizon. He wore a battered hat that shaded his eyes, a poncho draped over his shoulder like a second skin, and a cigar clenched tight between his teeth. His horse, like him, looked worn but unshaken. This was no ordinary drifter. The man rode into town like he belonged there, not in the way locals belonged, but like he owned the dirt under his boots. He reined in slowly in the center of a town, just outside the cantina. Eyes followed him, measuring him, maybe even daring him. The town was ruled by two warring families, the Rojos and the Baxters, and no one stirred trouble without choosing a side. But this stranger, he didn't look like he answered to anyone. Sliding off his horse, he looked around with a quiet calculation. He noticed the coffin maker across the street, an old man with sunken eyes and a nervous twitch. Without turning his head, the stranger muttered with dry confidence, "Get 3 coffins ready." Then he stepped toward trouble. The stranger walked with a slow, deliberate stride, boots crunching against the dirt road, poncho swaying with each step. He wasn't in a hurry. He didn't need to be. Every movement said one thing: "I've done this before." He made his way toward a well, where a group of 4 men stood, 3 on the ground and 1 perched above in the lookout. They were laughing, loud, crude, and mocking, like wolves who'd spotted a lamb. But what they saw wasn't a lamb. It was a storm, dressed in silence. These men worked for the Rojo family, the nastier of the 2 gangs choking San Miguel. They shook down strangers and terrified locals for sport. And now they had a new target. One of them stepped forward, grinning wide and mean. He spat tobacco and said something about the stranger's horse, how ugly it was, how maybe it should be shot just to put it out of its misery. The stranger didn't flinch. He didn't blink, just stood there, cigar still in place, eyes locked on the speaker, like he was already carving the man's name on a tombstone. The others joined in, throwing insults and laughing harder, trying to rattle him. They circled loosely, half serious, half bored, expecting him to back down or run like everyone else did. But the stranger didn't move. And then, cool as the breeze before a thunderclap, he said, "My mule don't like people laughin'." The laughter stopped. He continued, voice low and dry like sandpaper. "He gets the crazy idea you're laughing at him. Now, if you apologize, like I know you're going to, I might convince him that you really didn't mean it." Silence hung thick in the air. No one moved. What had started as mockery now felt like the prelude to something deadly. The Rojo men glanced at each other, unsure whether to laugh again or reach for their guns. They chose wrong. The silence was unnatural. It pressed in from every direction, broken only by the occasional creak of a wooden sign swaying in the dry wind. The townspeople held their breath behind shutters and cracked doors. They'd seen enough violence to know when death was about to visit, and death had just spoken. The 4 Rojo gunmen stood frozen, unsure if this stranger was bluffing or mad. One of them, the youngest, shifted nervously, his hand twitching just inches from the butt of his revolver. Another, tall and lean, with a scar down his cheek, stared hard at the stranger like he could break him just by squinting. But the stranger didn't move. His eyes remained steady beneath the shadow of his hat. The cigar was still there, burning slow. His hands hung relaxed at his sides. Not poised, not clenched, just ready. It was the kind of calm that only came from a man who'd survived too many fights to fear another. Then it happened. Fast, brutal, final. The young one twitched first, thinking speed would give him the edge. His hand flashed toward his holster. He barely got the revolver halfway up before the stranger drew. One shot, a dull, flat crack. The young man's body jerked backward and collapsed into the dust, his weapon clattering useless beside him. The tall one tried next, moving almost in sync. Another shot rang out. He dropped like a sack of grain, his lifeless eyes staring into the sun. The third didn't get far. He had barely unlatched his holster before the third bullet punched through his chest and spun him around. He hit the ground, gasping, then didn't move again. The fourth, the one up in the lookout, froze. Rifle in hand, he had the high ground, but no clear line of fire. His hesitation cost him. The stranger raised his gun slightly, aimed upward, and fired a final round. The lookout fell with a grunt, crashing through the wooden overhang and landing in a twisted heap just a few feet away from the well. And then stillness returned. All of it, the threats, the insult, the warning, the shooting, had taken less than 10 seconds, but it left the air feeling like a whole war had passed through. Smoke drifted from the stranger's gun. He spun the revolver once and slid it back into his holster like he'd done it 1,000 times. He turned away slowly, not sparing another look at the bodies behind him. Instead, he walked calmly back down the street toward the coffin-maker's workshop. As he passed the nervous old man, he paused just long enough to correct himself. My mistake. 4 coffins. Then he walked on, leaving silence and 4 dead men in his wake. The town of San Miguel had seen its fair share of gunmen. Bandits, bounty hunters, drifters. Most didn't last more than a few days. Some were too reckless, others too slow. But this man, this stranger in the poncho, had done something different. He didn't just kill, he made a statement. As he walked down the street, the townspeople emerged cautiously from their hiding places, blinking into the light like survivors of a storm. No one cheered, no one clapped. But word was already spreading like wildfire. A single man just walked into town, faced 4 armed killers, and put them all in the ground without taking a scratch. The coffin-maker, still stunned, wiped his trembling hands on his apron and got to work. He hadn't had this much business in weeks. 4 coffins, 4 graves, 4 families about to find out that their sons, brothers, or fathers had picked the wrong stranger to mess with. Inside the cantina, the bartender stood behind the counter, jaw clenched, watching the scene unfold through a dusty window. He'd seen the whole thing, every clean shot, every movement. He didn't know who the man was, but he knew this much. The Rojo family wouldn't take it lightly. They controlled half the town with fear and firepower, and one of their gangs had just been wiped out before lunch. The stranger walked into the cantina without a word. The door creaked open, and all conversation stopped. A few men sitting at the bar shifted uneasily, suddenly unsure of their place in the room. He stepped up to the counter and lit a fresh cigar. The bartender poured him a drink without being asked, hands still shaking. The man took it, nodded once, and drank in silence. He didn't gloat. He didn't explain himself. He just stared at the wall like he was waiting, not out of fear, but because he knew this wasn't over. In a town like San Miguel, blood never dried before someone came to spill more. The bartender finally found the courage to speak. "Rojo boys ain't gonna like what happened out there." The stranger didn't look up. He simply said, in that same calm, gravel-dry voice, "Let 'em come." And just like that, the myth began. This wasn't just a drifter anymore. This was a man with no name, no past, and apparently no fear. A man who just shifted the balance of power in San Miguel with 4 bullets and a single warning, and the town would never be the same again. Outside the cantina, the town remained unnervingly still. The bodies of the 4 Rojo gunmen lay where they'd fallen, already drawing flies. No one dared touch them. Not yet. That kind of cleanup came only after permission, and in San Miguel, permission came from power. And right now, power had just been challenged in the middle of the street. Word traveled fast. Before the sun shifted by more than an inch in the sky, news had reached both the Rojo and Baxter factions. The Rojo camp, notorious for its ruthlessness, took it as a direct insult. 4 men, all armed and seasoned, dropped in seconds by a stranger who didn't even bother to name himself. That wasn't just a problem. That was war. The Baxters, meanwhile, stayed quiet, intrigued. If someone could hit the Rojos like that, maybe he could be useful. Or maybe he was just another walking corpse waiting to be claimed. Either way, they knew better than to act without understanding the game. But the stranger, he wasn't playing any sides. He wasn't looking for alliances. He didn't need backup or favors. He simply sat in the cantina, sipping cheap whiskey like he had all the time in the world. Every once in a while, he'd glance toward the door. Not out of caution, but as if he were hoping someone would come through it. To him, danger wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. And behind those calm eyes, behind the cracks of sun-worn skin and the curl of cigar smoke, was a man with a code. Unspoken, unreadable, but it was there. You could feel it in the way he moved, the way he handled violence like it was just part of the job, like sweeping the floor or saddling a horse. He hadn't come to San Miguel for fortune. He hadn't come for fame. He'd come because it was broken. And something in him, something cold, shaped by years of killing, had decided he could fix it, even if that meant burning it all down. Outside, a dog barked once, then went quiet. The wind kicked up again, carrying dust across the blood-stained street. And in the cantina, the stranger lit another cigar and waited. Not because he was afraid of what came next, but because he already knew. This was just the beginning.